front everything good. Perfect. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming for this important side event. My name is Johannes Butcher, and I'm very honored to be your moderator today. I serve as the UN Global Engagement Coordinator for the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Dissent, and I'm based in Colombia. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you and our special guests as well to the side event titled Turning Up the Heat, Moulding Hardened Cast in Iron, Social Norms into Inclusive Shapes through Social Inclusion and Cohesion, as we look towards the achievements of the Copenhagen Declaration and towards the World Social Summit. This event is co-sponsored by the Permanent Mission of Germany, towards which we must extend our most heartfelt thanks for the support to making this happen. And we are obviously most honored also to have the ECOSOC President with us, Ambassador Bob Rae, who is also the permanent representative of Canada to the UN. And he will today deliver his keynote speech, opening this important discussion. And then we will go to the different panelists to give a little bit of the perspective and to have a little bit of an interactive dialogue in the end, if there's time. I want to also highlight one of the recent, what was featured as UN Expert Voices by the esteemed President of ECOSOC, when during the Partnership Council, he said the actual implementation of most of the agenda of the United Nations depends on the deep engagement and commitment of civil society. And I think this shows and illustrates really well the leadership and the engagement that Bob Rae has shown as ECOSOC President and also before and beyond. And we are most grateful for his leadership and that. And maybe also to note that it's not only about the words that he says, but there are actions which are tangible, which are really, we feel as civil society to make our voices most heard. So I think without much further ado, I would like to invite the Excellency Ambassador Bob Rae and President to give the opening address. And yeah, thank you, Meg, once more for his kind presence. And
well, thank you very much, Johannes. It's good to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. Unfortunately, just to be clear, I have to leave at 2. It's not because of anything anyone will have said. It's because, as I was pointing out to Maria, I have a life where I'm not allowed to be anywhere for more than a few minutes. It sort of seems to be part of the job of being president of ECOSOC. But thank you very much. Well, maybe 70 years ago, 65 years ago, one of the outstanding books in Canadian sociological research was completed with a book that's called The Vertical Mosaic. And it was the first sort of study in Canada of the power structure in the country, but also understanding the nature of the makeup of the country, how, depending on when you came, how you came, whether you were indigenous, non-indigenous, man, woman, white, of color, all ranges. We used to talk a lot about the Canadian mosaic, and he made a point of saying, yes, it's a mosaic, but the problem is it's a vertical mosaic. It's a mosaic in which there are serious discrimination in terms of opportunities and power that were built into the social structure of the country. And that social structure proved to be quite sticky and sometimes difficult to change. So, and the man who wrote it was a sociologist by the name of John Porter. And ever since Mr. Porter's book came out, and I read it as a young student, and as well as obviously looking at the world around me, I began to think long and hard about what it would take in terms of public policy to change that mosaic into a horizontal mosaic, and also how we could create conditions for greater inclusivity in our own country, but also looking at the way things are around the world. And I think the first thing I would say is that And I would have said this with more confidence up until a couple of months ago. It's easier to talk about these issues now than it was. But I think we also have to understand it because of the response that we're seeing in a number of countries and the growth of populist politics of one kind and another. It's need to continue. We'd have to continue to talk about it, yes, of course. We also have to look at what are the policies that work, how can we create the conditions that will lead to change, and how can we do this in our own countries, because it has to be driven by nation states as well as what the kind of discussions we can have at the UN, which will allow us to go forward. So when we look at the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the International Decade of People of African Descent, which we're going to have now a second decade, we are continuing to put these issues at the core. And I don't have to remind you that the Universal Declaration itself is very clear, and quite a remarkable document coming in late 1940s to say that discrimination of any kind, particularly taking into account race, religion, creed, and gender, is not something we want to see. But the reality is that today, we need to understand that we still do not live in anything like an equal world, or a world, not in terms of absolute equality of outcomes, because that's never going to happen. But when we look at reducing the levels of inequality, but also dramatically trying to improve the levels of mobility, which I think is the key concept that we need to keep coming back to. How effectively can we break through these barriers? How effectively can we see changes being made? And we know that there are several 100 million people, and I've spent quite a lot of time with one such group, the Rohingya, in Bangladesh and Myanmar, and in South Asia, where people are identified very quickly by virtue of who they are, and are immediately excluded, and immediately said, you are not welcome here, you're not welcome there, you're not welcome anywhere, essentially. And we have to understand everything there is to know about the discrimination against peoples in Europe. Obviously, the Holocaust, the most dramatic disaster to affect the Jewish population. But let's also remember that people of disability, the Roma and others, were deliberately targeted as well. And that this process of active discrimination, amplified by hate, amplified by social media of the time, is something that we have to keep on working on. And then we also have to understand, sometimes people are put off by the word intersectionality because it sort of seems like a jargon word. So let's just say there are people who are discriminated against for a variety of reasons, and sometimes these things all get jumbled up together. And so it leads to an even greater sense of discrimination, a greater sense of hardship. We're going to be looking at two major conferences this year, one on financing for development, the other one on the World Summit for Social Development. These will, I think, provide us with an opportunity to see how difficult it is to get the kind of language in these agreements that is going to make a difference. But we had a staff meeting this morning of our team, and I was saying to everybody, yes, the language is important. And we don't want to lose some of the progress we've made on language. And we want to keep fighting for the right language in all the documents that we debate. But even more than language, we need to make sure that it's the outcomes on the ground that we're able to still see progress on and we can identify. The reason the language is important because it allows us to identify a problem publicly, and it allows us to mouth the words that say, yes, there is this discrimination against the following groups. These people are even more excluded than others. And we can measure these things quite realistically. Access to education, access to political participation, access to ability to be represented and to be heard, to be seen in the popular culture as well as in other ways, and to be included in every way, and to break down the barriers of discrimination, which are so appalling and so hurtful and so devastating to the people who are affected in this way. We hope very much that in both the development conference and in the social summit, we'll be able to talk about the real meaning of inclusion and the real meaning of allowing people to advance and addressing this question of mobility, the personal ability to break through the barriers, but also the broader than just the individual discrimination. It's a discrimination against people because they're members of a particular group, and how harsh and difficult and painful that can be. So all I can say is that the work that we do as nation states, of course, at home matters. The lack of civility in our debates now is difficult. It's painful. The level of hatred that we see in social media, that anybody, I'm on social media, anybody, some of you will know. I mean, the best guide I ever had was somebody said, please don't read the comment section today, Ambassador. You'll find if you're not having a good day on the comment section. I said, well, that's fine. We'll forget about that. I won't read that for a while. But here I am. I'm an older white male. So I realized that my life has been a life of relative privilege. My father was a diplomat. I can't say in my own life that I have ever felt a profound sense of discrimination or a feeling of being marginalized, except for a period when I was suffering as a young man, suffering from serious mental health challenges, when I was, in a sense, self-isolated and felt marginalized myself because of the condition that I had at that time. But I do think it is the most important thing we can do in life, is to recognize in every person the dignity of their life and how we share something that is extraordinarily important, and that is our humanity. And we have to have a profound sense that it's our humanity and our shared humanity that allows us to escape the identifications of caste and class and race and gender, as saying, yes, they're important, and yes, they do define, to some extent, they do define who we are, and they do define our character, but they are not all encompassing. And if they become all encompassing, then they force us to deny this thing that we share, which is our common humanity. And I think it's important that we remember that, and that we listen and learn from each other, understanding the experience, understanding the challenges that people face, and then figuring out what are the ways to overcome that and to reach out and do something about it. I am a strong believer in public policies that deal with this issue. I do not believe that by taking away the policies and taking away the names and the identification, that we are advancing the cause of freedom, equality, or solidarity, or anything. I think all we're doing is abandoning people in the face of structures which are oppressive and can be deeply discriminatory. So we need to have policies that push things along and move things forward in a positive way. And I think that continues to be an important thing we need to engage in this debate about. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Johannes, for letting me say a few words. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing from others. And if I disappear, as I said, it's not, I apologize in advance for having to leave, but thank you for including me in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words of wisdom, and also of sharing all the kind of personal stories. Also, I think that it's much appreciated. And before we go on, I think I want to say a few words about solidarity, because I think you mentioned that I'm also a white male having the privilege to serve. And I think the shortcomings of visa issues or other obstacles to travel is in a way why I am here and not someone else to moderate this debate. And these are practical obstacles that we need to overcome together, and also extend the solidarity towards everyone who is discriminated against. And before we go to our first panelist, I just want to maybe also one step back in terms of the issue today, which is called the communities discriminated on work and descent. And this kind of umbrella term has really been created by the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CERT. But also more recently, we have seen that the African Commission for Humans and People's Rights has adopted a groundbreaking resolution calling for a continental study and other steps to follow. And I think with this in mind, we have an expert on EU policy with us, Mr. Mark Kamperov, of the German Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. And his intervention, I guess, will focus on the European aspect and also on the Roma community specifically. And maybe one more word about the idea of today is to have in the beginning the interventions from the floor, from the panelists, but then also go a little bit into a more interactive debate with the audience and amongst the panelists, amongst each other, if there are any thoughts and reflections you want to have. I'm also looking forward in terms of actionable things that we can maybe demand or think about as we approach the second World Social Summit. But I'm talking too much, and the panelists have the floor. Mr. Kamperov, we're very grateful that you have the time and the ability to be with us today. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Johannes, and thanks a lot for the invitation. It's really an honor, but also a pleasure to be here today with you. And thanks a lot, Mr. Ambassador, for your inspiring words. I hope to go on in this direction and show you a little bit what's happening at EU level, but also which measures we are taking as the German government in order to protect and also support, especially I'm taking the example of Sinti and Roma people in order to have it more concrete what we're doing. As Johannes said, I'm the Director of EU and International Affairs Policy at the German Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. I don't think it fits, no, it never fits on any nameplate, so it's quite complicated, but in general terms, it's the Federal Ministry for Generational Issues. So we call ourselves the Generations Ministry because we want to be there for all members of society, and especially for minorities, and fighting for equal rights for everybody. Talking about minorities, let me point out that in Germany, we have 4 recognized minorities. We have the Danish minority, we have Sorbians minority, we have the Frisians in the north of Germany, and the 4th minority is the Sinti and Roma minority that yeah, we have to admit it, they experience discrimination and exclusion, but this is for us one of the reasons also why they receive special protection and also specific funding from the federal and also the state level governments. Let me say about anti-Gypsyism, which is a special form of racism against Sinti and Roma. It is widespread in German society and it affects the everyday lives of Sinti and Roma communities. When we talk about or think about school life, at the workplace, the housing market, but also within public institutions. So in Germany, we're taking significant steps to combat this anti-Gypsyism at the federal level, making it a cross-cutting issue in our domestic policy. And I give you just some examples. For us of utmost importance of this commitment is that we have established an independent commission on anti-Gypsyism, which published a 600-page report back in June 2021. Now you can think it's just another report, but for us it's not just another report, but it's the report on the situation of, or the state of play, the current state of play of on anti-Gypsyism in Germany. And this is for us a milestone because it lays out not only the state of play, but also the future in terms of recommendations on how to address anti-Gypsyism, how to foster participation of Sinti and Roma communities, and as well as their social inclusion. Because in order to really assess the situation, you need the data, you need to know what's going on. And so for us, this report was really the basis of our current initiative. And among these initiatives that were also recommended by this independent commission on anti-Gypsyism and that have been implemented already is that we've established the position of a federal government commissioner against anti-Gypsyism and for the life of Sinti and Roma in Germany. So this is the first ever commissioner that on anti-Gypsyism that the federal government has established. And this position actually reinforces the commitment of Germany and of the government to addressing the issue. And in order to illustrate it a little bit more, let me give you some more examples. When it comes, for example, or as you might know, Germany is a federal republic, so we have different layers of governments. We have the federal level, where I come from. Then there is the state level, so we have 16 states that are also governed in a, let me say, more or less independent way. And of course, we have the local level. And for us, an important project for better coordination of the work against anti-Gypsyism between these levels, so to say between the federal government and the federal states, is the establishment of a federal state commission against anti-Gypsyism and in favor of the lives of Sinti and Roma in Germany. So this commission that I've talked about was, there's a decision from, a really recent decision from June 2024 by the heads of the federal states, so the second level, and the federal chancellor in its final report that the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism had called for the creation of such a permanent commission between these different levels. And its purpose is to exchange information on the federal and the state measures and make recommendations on preventing and combating anti-Gypsyism, because we do not only want to address the issue at the federal level, but also it has to go on to the federal states and also at local communities, which is not always easy in Germany, but we're taking steps into this direction. When it comes to the very important issue of communication and dialogue, the first ever Sinti and Roma Forum took place in October 2023 with more than 150 participants. The majority of them were representatives of Sinti and Roma self-organizations, as well as representatives of federal ministries, the federal states, also our parliament, the Bundestag was there, represented foundations and of course NGOs. There was another second forum just now in November 2024 with more than 200 participants. So you see it's actually, there's a growing interest also in this form of communication and dialogue. Then I talked about, as another example that I mentioned already, is data and monitoring. Actually in 2021, the Independent Anti-Gypsyism Reporting and Information Center was established. It's called MIA in German. And MIA is actually a civil society monitoring agency that had not been there before, and that systematically records and evaluates instances of anti-Gypsyism that occur in Germany. Its aim is to really shed light on the manifestations and of the extent of anti-Gypsyism in German society, and to raise awareness of the problem. Because as I said, if you don't know what's going on, if nobody can report these incidents, you would always think, okay, there is a problem, but we really need the figures and the cases. And I can tell you a figure, because in its last report, this center, MIA, documented more than 1,200 anti-Gypsyist incidents for the year 2023. So more than 1,200. And this is actually the only such monitoring agency which is focused on recording anti-Gypsyism in Europe. So the only one in not only in Germany, but in Europe. When it comes to funding, we have a huge federal program, which is called Live Democracy, which funds in the first line civil society organizations by more than 100 million euros per year. It's more or less also $100 million at the moment. And it comprises a wide range of projects at, again, the different levels, federal, state, and also local levels, to foster civic education, strengthen diversity, and also fight extremism and discrimination. And it also specifically funds projects which counter anti-Gypsyism and empower Sinti and Roma communities. Actually, within the program Live Democracy, there's a special focus on Roma women and girls that are, again, especially targeted. Then another big point for us is the contacts to and between the institutions. The federal government commissioner for matters related to ethnic German resettlers and national minorities is our point of contact between, again, the federal government and the 4 national minorities in Germany that are pointed out, including, of course, the minority of German, Sinti, and Roma. And this was kind of in order to show the German commitment. But another level is, of course, the European Union, which is our basic framework of cooperation. And the measures that I've pointed out before are all part of our national strategy on combating anti-Gypsyism and ensure participation, which is at this side an implementation of the EU Roma Strategy 2030. This European-wide strategy was adopted in 2022 and will further be developed by taking into account the recommendations of the Independent Commission on Anti-Gypsyism established in Germany. So there's another layer at European level in order to bring also the EU member states together. And then when we talk about strategies, in the framework of this national strategy, the German parliament, our Bundestag, just now in December 2023, adopted a motion for resolution as a cross-party initiative whose main topic was the fight against anti-Gypsyism. So you see, it's really a cross-party initiative. It's not linked to a specific party or a specific political opinion. It's really a cross-cutting issue for us. And finally, let me point out that during the presidency that Germany held of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, their working definition of anti-Gypsyism was developed and adopted by all the 34 member states of the IHRA in October 2020. And then on that basis, in March 2021, the working definition was also adopted nationally by the German Cabinet of Ministers all together. And the work of this alliance is of increasing significance for us also because we think that it offers valuable opportunities of exchange between experts and also government representatives. And we engage strongly within the IHRA to follow up on these important topic, and we strive for the adoption of the working definition of anti-Gypsyism, both nationally and internationally, of course, including by all civil society organizations. So this was really in order to give you a first overview of what we do at national level with the German example, but also in order to put it into the context of the activities of the European Union. We have to admit it's still, anti-Gypsyism is still a big problem. Discrimination is widespread in Germany, of course, also. But we've taken, in our opinions, significant steps just in the last years also to overcome or to help overcome this phenomenon and together with our European partners to really move forward with the EU strategy of Roma strategy until 2030. Also. So maybe let me stop here for now, and thank you so much for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, and inspiring, I think, to see, I mean, there's a monitoring tool and there are specific policies to address the issue. And I think these are the solutions already that we kind of want to talk about today as well. Beyond the problem, the solutions that we want to find, and also looking at how to integrate them potentially at another kind of outcome document or ambition that we can formulate as part of the upcoming summit in November this year. Given the time and given I wanted to normally come first to Maria, since she represents also the Roma community, I would like to turn first to the African continent, since this is kind of a topic that has come really recently, really strongly about discrimination based on work and descent in that sense. And I'm really happy that we could find a replacement for our speaker who did not get the visa in the last minute. But he's still here, based in New Jersey, based in New York. Mr. Bakari Tandia is the co-founder of the Abolition Institute and a human rights advocate organization that focuses on slavery and human trafficking. He has been long engaged in Mauritania and in Africa generally, but also now in the US. His advocacy has not stopped. But before I go on, I want to give you the floor to make your intervention, please.
So thank you very much, Johan and Ambassador. Thank you very much for your inspiring and motivating speech. And I really enjoyed, your talk. In 2007, I was in Germany in an exchange program, the State Department and Kobo Foundation in Hamburg. So we met with different group of advocates. It was a very enriching and very interesting program. So my name is Bakri Tanjakov, co-founder of the Abolition Institute. And also I represent ERA, the Initiative for the Resurgence of the Abolitionist Movement in Mauritania. As you all know, unfortunately, Mauritania is very well known to be the last country where slavery is still a reality. So I am very honored to be part of this event, because when it comes to human rights, it's about networking, it's about sharing information, it is about working together. So this is what this event is all about. So this gathering focusing on strengthening solidarity, social inclusion, and social cohesion is very, very important. It falls into what we have been doing as as a member of or founder of the Abolition Institute and ERA. So this is a very important mission, and that is the motivating or the driving energy of human rights advocates. We are committed advocates in the fight to ensure social justice for all. In fact, we are the guardrails against the enactment and enforcement of discriminatory rules and laws against vulnerable people by the powerful. So my organization, Abolition Institute, is really focusing on that. We work for the mainly the eradication of slavery in Mauritania and the neighboring country. As you know, in West Africa, we have so many similar situations. Before I move forward, I must commend the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for adopting the resolution on the protection and promotion of the right of communities discriminated by work and descent during its 81st ordinary session held in Banjul in 2024. By acknowledging that discrimination based on work and descent continues to form, it is a form of social origin discrimination under the Charter, the Commission has made an outstanding contribution. Now, advocates can strategically use this in their campaign. This would not happen without the hard work and the unwavering commitment of the African Network on Discrimination based on work and descent and contemporary form of slavery. So congratulations to the network. Social origin discrimination is a socially normalized glass ceiling which condemns many people to live out of their lives in organized oppression. Though its forms and strategies may differ from region to region around the world, the end goal is to deprive members of those victimized communities of their fundamental rights to achieve their full human potential. In the case of Mauritania, we have a group called Haratin. We have a group called Haratin who are currently or previously enslaved. They are the most impacted by social origin discrimination. However, it is important to mention that this discrimination affects all communities in Mauritania, including Black African communities, where feudality and the caste system continues to be a source of inclusion and marginalization. Furthermore, this phenomenon is pervasive in a West African community. That's why, in order to, the eradication of this phenomenon requires, collaboration and working together. For the interest of time, I want to focus on the condition of Harati. Unfortunately, they have been enslaved for centuries. Though some have been liberated, many remain in bondage. However, owned or freed, their conditions are alike. Prospects for a member of Haratin community to succeed in Mauritania is very slim because of the discriminative power structure that is in place. To put it bluntly, although they represent about 50% of the country population, they are victim of the same type of discriminatory policies seen in America in Jim Crow South for African American. Most members of the government benefit greatly from this system that excludes such a large portion of its population. They continue to pretend that people have equal access to social and economic opportunity, which is not the reality. Though we have a battery of legislations addressing slavery, racial discrimination in Mauritania, they are not enforced because the hypocritical decision makers are an integral part of the unfair, unequal system, which is the root causes of the problem. Thanks to many organizations such as SOS Esclave, the Initiative for the Resurgence of the Abolitionist Institute, Sahel Foundation, and many other organizations, progress is being made. Since fighting against this deep-rooted injustice require collaborative work and effort, our organization, Abolition Institute, has been able to build partnership with many organizations. We work with organizations on the ground, SOS, and Iran, many other organizations. We even organized fact-finding missions to Mauritania. The first time we organized, we went to Mauritania, that was in 2017. Even though everything was planned, coordinated with the Mauritian government, when we landed, we were, declared persona non grata. So we were held at the airport. Our passport were collected. Internet was shut down. We had to wait for the plane to come back from Conakry to return to Paris. And even our partners who came to welcome us at the airport were not allowed to come close, to the airport. This is how, the system, works in Mauritania. And unfortunately, as I am speaking to you here, there are still people who are in bondage. My organization, to recognize and support those who are doing this work, we decided to create an award named after the first woman who was freed by SOS slave. As you know, the main victims in this system are the women. So we have partners here also in the in the US, such as Zakat Foundation. We try to incorporate humanitarian dimension into what we do, because as a slave or a recently free slave without education, without resources, freedom doesn't mean anything to you if you are in a position where you can be, self-sufficient. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share, what is happening in Mauritania, and also to contribute to this very important, debate. And again, Excellence, I am so impressed by your thought and wisdom, and we need more people like you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dandia. I want to hold in the air. This is the African resolution that was adopted, including by the state of Mauritania, since international pressure came or was in the African Commission so powerful, and also based on a study by the Gambian Human Rights Commission. So the tide is turning now for recognition in Africa and beyond. And this is, I think, a great step of progress that this has been made. I think, yeah, we have two more speakers on the panel that also shows the global dimension of this. And before we come to Maria to present the Roma community, I want to contextualize a little bit and also say, Maria, tell us about the similarities that you have also that you see together with the Haratin community of Mauritania, and our colleague from the Dalit community is also there to talk about this. Talk a little bit about what is the similarities and why come together in this crucial time of division. Why is it so important that these communities kind of come together and have a common cause to fight for? The floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Tanja. Thank you, Mr. Kramperov, Your Excellency, as well. I'm really happy to be here. It is an honor for me. I would start with a bit of the Roma context again. I'm happy to know that actually Germany is taking so many steps tackling anti-Gypsyism. This is a very prevalent issue which needs to be tackled more in a broader sense, especially in the European Union. I would like to start with a bit of a context and highlighting some of the commonalities, and also talk a bit of more actionable steps that we can tackle discrimination on work and descent regarding all of the communities that we represent. I'm Maria Tanasova, and I represent the European Roma Grassroots Organization here. From the previous conversation, we already highlighted that discrimination based on work and descent affects million people worldwide. It is different communities, different contexts, but very similar and shared experiences. Reflecting on the discussions this week, the commitment to solidarity, inclusion, and social cohesion, it is more important than ever, especially since the second World Social Summit is approaching. So we really need to have all of these topics in the back of our minds and emphasizing over and over again. Contextualizing about Romani people in Europe, all across Europe, between 10 and 12 million Romani people live. They represent the largest ethnic minority group that is experiencing discrimination rooted in historical and social hierarchies. There are a lot of instruments. There is the European strategy has been mentioned as well. But although there is a commitment to tackle discrimination and tackle issues that affect Romani people, still this commitment has to be really emphasized that there is a lack of some efforts or monitoring policies all across the EU. So we really need to demand more into this direction. Just to emphasize how discrimination discrimination against the Roma people and Roma communities manifests. It manifests itself in multiple areas. For instance, in the labor market, the stereotypes and discriminatory hiring practices keep unemployment in an alarming rate. Especially when we talk about young people, we really like to talk how they're the future and talking about youth empowerment. There's quite of a shocking statistics that over 60% of Roma youth in Europe are not in employment, education, or training. Another disturbing number that is 80% of Roma in Europe are at risk of poverty compared to 17% of the general population. So these disparities, they really reflect the structural inequalities which persist in the anti-discrimination frameworks as well. Related to education, Romani children are overrepresented in segregated schools, which perpetuates further cycles of poverty and discrimination. So this is segregation in schools. It's a very persistent issue all across European countries and European member states. As already mentioned, this struggle and structural issues are not unique only to Romani people in Europe. It connects us to Dalits in Asia, to Quambolas communities in Latin America, Paratin in Africa, and Burakimin in Japan, and other groups worldwide. So it is really a key to recognize this interconnection in order to foster global solidarity and ensure that no community is left behind. So although these systems shaped by different histories and contexts, they impact individual lives all across the world. So addressing discrimination based on work and descent requires a global effort. And in this line, I would like to emphasize and highlight some actionable steps. Firstly, explicit recognition. Discrimination based on work and descent must be explicitly acknowledged. Without recognition, these injustices will remain invisible and unaddressed. Second, targeted policies. Policies, as Your Excellency mentioned, I also believe in policies, and they are a key. So I believe that governments and international bodies, they must implement policies that dismantle structural barriers faced by affected communities. This includes promoting equitable access to education, fair labor opportunities, and strong anti-discrimination laws. In this sense, as well, congrats to the German Federal Ministry for tackling anti-Gypsyism and all the 1,300 cases that have been reported. This shows that there is some effort and it has to be acknowledged, but also we need to reflect on the fact that how many other cases, not only in Germany, but all across Europe are not being reported. Third, accountability mechanisms. Monitoring frameworks are crucial. We must establish and track the progress in combating these forms of discrimination. This includes ensuring that affected communities have a voice in these mechanisms as well. And lastly, resource allocation. Greater investment is needed in programs and to empower marginalized groups and ensure their meaningful participation in social and economic life. While civil society and global grassroots organizations work to amplify the voices of communities discriminated on work and descent, we cannot do this alone. It requires collective will and collaboration. That is why we are addressing this to member states and UN bodies as well. By addressing discrimination based on work and descent, we can take a decisive step toward building a world where dignity, inclusion, and solidarity are universal realities. The Second World Social Summit presents a unique opportunity for member states to demonstrate their leadership in combating systematic discrimination. Together, we need to ensure that communities discriminated on work and descent are not only included, but also empowered to thrive. Thank you.
Sorry, I have to leave. No, that's a good sleep.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. And as we wave goodbye to His Excellency, I think what you mentioned in the end, the World Social Summit, I mean, because the issue of work and dissent-based discrimination is not present in the SDGs. It's not present in the Pact for the Future. So why not use the outcome document and the mechanism of monitoring to be the Commission for Social Development in the future as one of the key issues to be addressed? So this is, I think, also our idea and appeal and also inputs for the so-called food for thought paper that we see is to include this issue into the outcome document and then use the commission, the annual commission, as a monitoring tool for this specific group. But before we kind of go for a little bit of a reflection from the panelists and also from the audience, if we have time, I want to give the floor to the last speaker. Dinesh Junakuti is based in Australia of Indian diaspora and also represents the Dalit community as he identifies as this community as well. He's the advocacy and policy officer for the Inclusivity Project and had the opportunity to speak yesterday, make a powerful statement as part of the general discussion in the Commission for Social Development, and is really an advocate for the rights of Dalits and all communities discriminated in work and dissent. To his background, just one more issue. He worked for a long time in the Australian government, working on indigenous issues, which are a little bit different, but still related. So we are most delighted to have him as well. And Dinesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Johannes. And I will thank the ambassador, even though he's not here, and for his opening statements and obviously his wisdom that he's an insight, which is very, very relevant to us. Thank you, Mr. Kamperhoff, for being here, for talking about the great work that you're doing as part of your work with the Roma and Sinti people in Germany, and of course to the Permanent Mission of Germany for co-sponsoring this event. And of course, thank you all for being here, taking time out of your very busy schedules when you could have been having lunch to listen to our issues and what we will talk about today. I will speak on the issue of discrimination based on work and dissent prevalent across Asia, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Japan, Sri Lanka. And Johannes mentioned that I worked quite a bit in Australia for a while, but also the diaspora groups in Australia. So it's not just across the specific countries in Asia, but sort of spreading across other countries as well. But as I say this, I turn to my fellow panelists, Maria, representing the Roma community, and Bakari from Mauritania, to acknowledge that the issues that they have talked about in their communities is also what is happening in my region, and we share similar patterns of discrimination. We've been subjected to discrimination based on social stratifications and have been historically stigmatized to be excluded and discriminated based on our identity or caste. We continue to face extreme forms of isolation and discrimination, even harassment and violence, which act as insurmountable obstacles in our attainment of civil, political, economic, and social rights. This form of stigma has led to our social and physical segregation and discrimination in social, economic, political, religious, and cultural rights and entitlements. Although our communities are dispersed globally, our shared similarities of the discrimination we face is testament to the fact that discrimination on the basis of work and dissent is an interconnected global issue with common characteristics like caste systems, untouchability based on the notion of purity and pollution, endogamy, modern slavery, gross atrocities and violence, and low human development ratings. Together, we number more than 270 million people worldwide. We are Dalits in South Asia, Orokamin in Japan, Roma across Europe, Quilombolas and Palenqueros in Latin America, and Haratin and Osu communities in Africa, as my friend Bakari has just mentioned. Due to the constraints of time, I will provide a few examples of the practices of discrimination based on work and dissent in the Asian region. Despite the abolition of untouchability by Article 17 of the Indian Constitution way back in 1950, many children are still treated untouchable by teachers and other students in schools. This includes segregation in classrooms, exclusion from school ceremonies, and denial of access to school water or supplies. Despite the right to education, which requires that every local authority ensure that children belonging to disadvantaged groups are not discriminated against and prevented from pursuing and completing elementary education on any grounds, teachers, school administrators, and other students deny Dalit children access to an equal education by treating them as unequal, often resulting in an effective exclusion from school altogether. In Nepal, practices of segregation based on caste as an identity is still prevalent. In its State Party review in 2018, the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination expressed its deep concern by reports that such segregation persists in practice, preventing marginalized castes, including Dalits, from safely marrying members of other castes, from accessing places of worship or public spaces, public sources of food and water, educational facilities, and housing facilities occupied by members of other castes. The committee also noted that sexual and other forms of violence against Dalit women are common and often go unpunished. Because 40% of Dalits in Nepal live in poverty, the majority of Dalit girls marry before 15 years of age, putting them at heightened risk of being subjected to sexual and domestic violence and impeding their access to education. There are also caste disparities in reproductive health and maternal mortality, as Dalit women are far less likely to have access to a skilled birth attendant. Buraku people are a Japanese social minority group, ethnically and linguistically indistinguishable from other Japanese people who face discrimination in Japan because of an association with work once considered impure, such as butchering animals or tanning leather. The largest Buraku political organization, the Buraku Liberation League, estimates that there are over 6 million people worldwide. The League produces annual reports that track hundreds of cases of discrimination that happen throughout Japan every year, cases which include harassment and refusal of marriage or employment. Having said that, we are encouraged by the steps that some member states have taken. The Nepal government has taken progressive steps, especially with the adoption of the new constitution in 2016. In South America, Brazil's National Statistics Agency, IBGE, collaborated with Quilombola communities to carry out an inclusive census in 2022. At the regional level, we've talked about the African Commission on Human and People's Rights resolution passed in November last year on the promotion and protection of communities discriminated on work and dissent, calling for a continental study on the situation of these communities, including its underlying causes, manifestations, and the discriminatory practices. Globally, the Commission on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination adopted UN General Recommendation 29 on dissent-based discrimination, which recommends that all states should take steps to identify these communities under their jurisdiction who suffer from discrimination, especially on the basis of caste and analogous systems of inherited status. In line with the priority theme of our event today and the ECOSOC Forum, as we are having conversations on the importance of social cohesion, the importance of addressing discrimination based on work and dissent is critical. In the position papers put out in relation to the ECOSOC, we define social cohesion as the glue that binds societies together and enables members to coexist and develop. Cohesive societies minimize inequalities and avoid marginalization, seeking to ensure the well-being of all its members. This means that in socially cohesive societies, there are processes in place to improve the inclusion of people who are in a disadvantaged situation, be it on the grounds of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, economic and migration status, or any other factor. The most important component of social cohesion is social inclusion, for which governments have a principal role in advancing by enacting laws, policies, and procedures that ensure equal access to social and economic rights and opportunities for all. The 2025 Summit, World Social Summit, offers a unique chance to turn commitments into action. So let us strengthen solidarity, reduce inequalities, and focus on building inclusive societies where no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinesh, for your inspiring words and also really good overview of the Asian dimensions. I would like to open a little bit the floor to the panelists if they have any reflections or further things you want to mention. I, on my part, forgot to introduce Maria probably. She's a Fulbright scholar and also Romanian activist from Bulgaria. I'm sorry I did say this before. She also trained as a midwife, and whenever people hear this, they ask her, how many babies have you delivered? And you can ask her this after the event. So she's not only a scholar, but also has really hands-on experience and what may be considered one of the key elements of kind of life and social development in that sense. Apologies for them missing that out. But yeah, any reflections from the panelists, or should we also open it to the audience in the next step for any clarifications, questions? And also, I mean, how do we turn these ambitions into action? Our ambition is quite clear, but I think also we need to be, I mean, while you think about your questions, further reflection from my side, we need to also be critical about ourselves. I mean, our colleague who was meant to be here, Alima, could not come. How can we change this for the World Social Summit? And how can we transform our ambitions to include those communities into a kind of review mechanism or at least recognition into action, especially looking at the member states who adopted this resolution, but we didn't manage to get them on the panel, for example. So they are different. I think also introspectively, we need to see how to advance those things and also be open about the challenges that we still face and yeah. But please, the floor is open. Anyone would like to comment or question?
Cynthia Stewart, International Federation on Aging. And I was particularly pleased that a couple of you actually referenced age. And particularly, I think, Bob Rae, you talked about the discrimination against older women in this situation. And I think it's an exclusion, and we have a pact for the future to document what happens when older persons are not at the table. One exactly reference to older persons in the pact for the future, and how can we really ensure that we look at it from a lifespan perspective, because the youth of today are the older of tomorrow, and are we really transforming society to be one where all discrimination is not existent, including age? Help.
Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists and fellow delegates. My name is Mohammed Salman. I'm a representative of the NGO Children and Youth International and a major group of children in youth. Today, we gather to confront deeply entrenched social norms that have been long excluded in communities. 270 million people worldwide who continue to face systematic barriers to defend mental rights, freedom, and human dignity. The challenges they endure, from education deprivation and economic exclusion to structural discrimination and gender-based violence, all this which underscores the urgent need for bold and inclusive action. For children, youth, and girls in these communities, conflict aggravates existing inequalities, disrupting education, limiting economic opportunities, and deepening cycles of marginalization. Young people, despite being among the most affected, have consistently been at the forefront of social development, championing dignity, resilience, and human rights. We must accelerate and transform the commitments of the Copenhagen Declaration by implementing policies that integrate comprehensive social protection systems that protect down barriers to education, employment, and healthcare. Intersectional human rights frameworks that ensure the meaningful participation of youth in policy making and governance, and initiative financing mechanisms to support youth-led initiatives in economic empowerment, particularly in post-conflict settings. Through community-led initiatives, peer-to-peer learning, and meaningful participation, we can mold rigid social structures in inclusive frameworks that uphold equity, justice, and human dignity. The commitments of Copenhagen must not remain unfinished business. Let us stand together in intergenerational, intercultural, and intergender solidarity, transform exclusion and empowerment and ensure that no one, regardless of birth or background, is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two more, but we also would like the panelists to reflect. So maybe if we can have here 1 minute, and in the back 1 minute, and then we go back to the panelists for the closing. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Jan. I'm here with the NGO called the Copenhagen Declaration. I'm European, and as Joanne had been acknowledging, there's a lot of populism on the rise, especially maybe in Europe, and a lot of governments are maybe going to change in the future, and maybe towards like directions that doesn't hold like anti-discriminatory measure in their heart. And so I was wondering how to maybe protect those measures across like ideological shifts, and how to make sure that this is like a long-term protection of, for example, Roman people, and not just like the government can already said. That makes sense.
Thank you very much for the question, please.
Hi, my name is Yvette Allen. I'm a researcher by international. And I really, really appreciated this discussion. It's been so enlightening learning about different mechanisms and approaches to addressing different forms of discrimination. And I'm just really curious to hear and learn a little bit about what I'm hearing is what's common to all the many forms of discrimination in society is this deeper question of prejudice, the way in which we have these attitudes, underlying beliefs, fears, perceptions about groups. And I'm wondering, what can institutions do, or how can we utilize policies to address this deeper root question of prejudice? Because I think my sense is that will lead to kind of the most enduring change, where we don't even have this discrimination in the first place. So I'm wondering how to get to the root.
Thank you very much. I turn to the panelists. Please take the floor if any reflections or comments you may have.
Maybe to reflect on the last two comments, kind of connecting the mechanisms and ideology, I was thinking, well, there are laws and punishable laws, and thinking also about anti-racism and frameworks, etc. But I think they're really important to be followed by governments, to be followed by member states. I think this is one of the main mechanisms in order to also prevent shifting into ideology and connecting to populism as well, because once, hate speech or racism and very obvious populistic values and views are spread out, because it is not a separate case, but plenty examples within the EU and politicians from the highest positions making hate speech arguments and hate speech comments related to Romani communities and other communities as well. And this is being normalized. So I think there has to be a stronger push on that, to follow these rules and policies which already exist in order to prevent the ideological shift as well, and populism, which already is quite prevalent.
Yeah, this is it is a very important issue. So one of the challenge is, if I take the example of Mauritania, for instance, with regard to slavery, racial discrimination, Mauritania signed more international conventions than any European country. So you can check it for yourself. But the purpose of signing and ratifying those conventions is not meant to address the issues, but only for public relation purpose, because most of the time countries are being evaluated in terms of how many laws the parliament adopted to consider that progress is being made. In the case of slavery, slavery has been elevated as a crime against humanity in Mauritania, but nobody is being held accountable. We don't need, a crime against, if it is 2 years, 5 years in prison, we would prefer that to be applied than adopting harsh punishments, which will never be enforced. So that we have everything in the constitutions, we have laws, but they are completely ignored because of the power, structure, because those who are ruling the country are benefiting from the system, are making, the decision. So that's why the situation almost remains the same. So to address this, we need more research, more academic engagement. We need to have religious leaders in those communities to be actively engaged. Most of those communities listen carefully to religious, leaders, and religious leaders tend to side, with the government, which is completely wrong. How to reverse that, and to have them, engage and to support the, communities and the victims. So this is what I wanted to share the example. Maybe the example of Mauritania is applicable to many other countries where they just pass laws, decisions, policies will never be, applied or enforced.
Thank you, Bakari. Mr. Kamprov, you want to have the second last word, or you want to say anything else before we close? We give him the last word in closing.
Mr. Kamprov.
Then, Mr. Kamprov, you have the last word to close also.
Thank you very much. But we talked about this actually, about the way forward. What can we do with the uprising right? Let's put it that way. I mean, first of all, I talked about the motion for resolution, which was really a cross-party issue in Germany. So I think I'm really convinced there are still issues where we have a common consensus on, and even with the shrinking spaces, we have to see, we don't have to let the others speak for us. I mean, not because they are louder or they are very loud, they are not always right. And we also have our like-minded coalitions on different levels, at EU level, at national level, with the NGOs. And we really have to bring ourselves together in order to show that we are kind of on the right side. And maybe in this context, also what you said about aging, very true. My ministry is also responsible for senior citizens. And maybe to end up on a positive note, I'm the head of the German delegation for the CSOC this year. And this is actually my delegation, starting from the youth delegates to my colleague from the ministry, and ending with Renate, who is 65 plus, let's say, who is really actively engaged, and she comes with us every year. So just to show you that we really want to bring everybody on board and address these issues also with the people involved, because this is really an important point, I think.
Thank you so much to such a positive note to end. I think, yeah, coalition building, solidarity, and I think we are preaching a little bit to the converted in the room. I think it's also our task now to reach out, to increase our work, and we also invite all of you to come and help us in that, and to champion our cause and cross solidarity to other causes as well. So thank you very much for attending. Next to the water in the back, there's material. Please take our global reports, our other interesting materials to have more information. And once more, thank you very much to all the panelists, the Permanent Mission of Germany, to the UN, and especially Mr. Kamprov for really your excellent solution-driven insights. Much appreciated. And hereby I close the panel, and thank you all again.
This is Dienstag sind da doing sounds. It's a sound.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today. We close the session here. There were some questions on the chat box, which I will forward to the moderator, to the team, and we'll try to get back to you. And please support us moving forward as well. Thank you so much for being here again. And thank you so much for our interpreters today who facilitated the discussion. Good night, good morning, good afternoon.